Welcome to the Rensselaer County Regional Chamber of Commerce's Spring 2022 Connect with Careers Week. I'm Kate Manley, President of the Chamber. I'm your host for this virtual career exploration series. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the Spring 2022 edition, Martin Electric, Mosaic Associate Architects, and WB Games. Today, I'm pleased that we're joined by Valecia Stocchetti, who is the Senior Cybersecurity Engineer for the Center for Internet Security. Welcome.
Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. So first, before we get started, tell us a little bit about CIS, or Center for Internet Security, so that our students are aware of what you all do.
Sure. So we're a nonprofit based out of East Greenbush, New York, so right in our backyard in Rensselaer County. Nonprofit, for those who don't know, just mean that our purpose is community driven. And we lead a global network, actually international reach of community professionals that are in information technology by developing cybersecurity best practices. So we do this by putting out products and services that defend against cyber threats like ransomware. And we have about 300 people that work at CIS currently, and they span across the country, so many of them remote. Some of our products we produce are the controls and the benchmarks, which are kind of global best practices that companies like Facebook and Twitter and other companies that have to adhere to those standards can implement to defend against the cyber threats. We also have two other divisions in our company called the MSISAC and EIISAC that are for state and elections offices, local governments across the country, to take advantage of the resources that we provide to them through the Department of Homeland Security. And even though many of the jobs in cyber are technical, there are many other non-technical positions that we need in the organization to run, like HR, finance, customer service, purchasing, etc.
That's great. And what's so neat about this is that, as you mentioned, you're right here in East Greenbush in Rensselaer County, but you have a national and global presence. So, I mean, for students and just thinking about what a gem we have here in our backyard. So yes. On a daily basis, as a senior cybersecurity engineer, what do you do?
So I work with a team called the CIS Controls. A big part of my team or my job is to help develop and support the CIS critical security controls. So just like a restaurant would have to go in and or an inspector would have to go into a restaurant and make sure that surfaces are clean and other stuff like that, cybersecurity has a whole world of standards that they have to adhere to. So for example, when you give your date of birth and social security number, the company that's taking that information has the responsibility to make sure that's protected. And so what we do is we develop these standards and best practices so that companies can adopt them and make sure they create a defense against cyber threats. So for example, ransomware, which is where a computer or a group of computers get their files encrypted, which just means that they can't access them anymore until they pay a ransom. And so that's one of the top threats that many organizations face today. And so one of my jobs is to develop those defenses to make sure that if there is an attempted attack, that it's not actually successful.
That's awesome. And it's a topic that's in the news often. So as our students, as you mentioned, anytime you're online and entering your date of birth and that information, there's those benchmarks, those procedures behind the scenes to keep your data safe. So this is really amazing. What did your personal pathway look like? How did you get where you are, from maybe starting in high school, what you wanted to be, and where you are now?
So in high school, I hated math and science, which is kind of funny. Those are my two favorite now, but my first career out of high school was actually in X-ray. So what they call a radiologic technologist, person that if you break your leg or break a bone, they take an X-ray. And I didn't really like the field, unfortunately. So I ended up working in marketing and restaurant management combination after that for a few years. When I really started getting interested in cybercrime was my last job before I started at CIS. And that's when I found the program at UAlbany in digital forensics. So that basically digital forensics is just like what you see on CSI when you're investigating maybe human DNA or evidence. And so this would be digital evidence. So things like computer hard drives and, cell phones and things like that. And so I graduated from UAlbany with my bachelor's in digital forensics, and now I'm attending an online program to get my master's in information security.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So how did you, when you applied to this digital forensic, what was like the reasoning to get involved with that? Was it because of the CSI, as you mentioned, type?
Not really, actually. I sort of fell into it. So there was a company in Schenectady that I used to work for, and they had so when somebody steals a credit card and then charges fraudulently on that credit card, the credit card company doesn't actually get responsible for paying that charge. The company itself that it's coming from is responsible for eating that charge, basically. So when I was working there, we had a huge influx of fraudulent charges on credit cards that the companies would send us. And so I, instead of just filing them away, which is what I was asked to do, I ended up making, raising the question, what do we do to prevent this? I knew nothing about cybersecurity. I ended up being an Internet of Things company that I worked for. So
Okay.
when they were like, just figure out something to do to stop it, and I had no idea. And so I ended up standing up this platform to like curb the fraud before it actually happened when people placed online orders. And I just got really interested in this whole world that I had no idea even existed. And that's when I started looking into programs to go back to school.
It's amazing how a small piece of a job or something can have such a big influence. Like you said, you were just, file those away, but you took interest in it, and then it jump-started a whole different career, which is truly amazing. So what skills do you use in the role that you're at now?
So definitely the biggest skills that I use are technical in nature. So, obviously cybersecurity is a technical field. But I think that a lot of my success in the field is due to the communication skills. And I really think sometimes that the communication skills are harder to teach than the technical. You can go to school and learn technical skills easily. But, having those soft skills are really the most desired when you're going into the field. And that's any field, not just cyber. But it just happens to be that in cyber, it just helps when you're trying to communicate, especially to people who don't know, cyber terms. And so you have to really build that bridge between the two. And I think that the other thing too is, well, I like to use the example, like you can be the smartest lawyer, but if you can't communicate your case to the judge or the jury, it's going to be very difficult to win the case. And so,
Right.
to put it in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a great example. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's really like what I try to relate. I speak to a lot of students about this career field. And so, being able to communicate is really important, because if you can't communicate what's happening on a network or a system or whatever, it's going to be very difficult to figure out or how to stop it, really.
That's incredible. So you alluded to it a little bit at the beginning, but what types of career pathways exist within the cyber industry? So you don't necessarily have to do the technical, as you say, but what types of pathways, if you wanted to get involved as a student in cyber, exist?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is there are a lot of positions, technical and non-technical, that are needed in cyber. For the technical positions, you generally start out as entry level, and that's my best recommendation. Like, some companies you can go to like business school and get your master's degree and then end up being, a business owner or a manager. But I think in cyber, especially, you really need to get those foundational skills in the field before you end up, starting to manage and whatnot. So in our company, like entry level positions usually start out as like an analyst level, depending on the department that you're working in.
Right.
So we have what's called a security operations center. We have a computer emergency response team, a cyber threat intelligence team. So all of those teams, specifically, you'll start out as like an analyst or, an intern, and then senior analyst, manager, and you work your way up. And it depends. Like some people might not ever want to be in management, right? They just might want to continue on the technical path, and that's totally fine. So, it just depends on what they're interested in and what your goals are. So non-technical positions could be things like project management, marketing, sales, training, customer service. Those are all still needed in the bigger picture, right? So project management, it kind of goes hand in hand with the if you can't communicate, it kind of you're at a standstill. So project managers are really needed to make sure that everything is moving and going smoothly. And it's hard for maybe an analyst or a technical position to make sure that the end user is completely satisfied. So sometimes they're actually existing in separate entities, but they work together. And so I think it's hard to summarize like one path or what a
Right.
path could look like, but I think in general, like for those who might be interested in going to college for this, you can pick a general path, and then when you get out, like cybersecurity is your general path, then you can decide on, oh, I want to go into malware analysis or something like that,
Mm.
and then take maybe certifications towards that. So there's different paths that you can take even after you get out with a general cyber degree.
That's great. So we talk about a lot about transferable skills and, the future of work and how maybe skills that you're learning now and where is work going? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what are some transferable skills that are practical in cyber and maybe where the trends are going, that there's a whole nother career that might not exist right now within cyber?
Yeah, so well, and I think for me, my transferable skills really helped in my current role. So I talked a little bit about, my previous jobs, and well, some might not think that restaurant management has anything to do with cyber. It taught me a lot of customer service skills, and so those are things that are needed, when you're working with people in the community. Um, and then, for example, working in X-ray, I learned a lot about being compassionate towards people who, may not be in the best position. So I think those skills, those soft skills, really transferred to my current industry. As far as where the field is going, I think that if anyone's interested in picking a field in cyber or a career in cyber, you're definitely not going to be out of a job, especially if you're very good at
No.
what you do. Because I can't even remember what they're up to now, but it's like hundreds of thousands, if not more, of jobs that will be not filled in the next years or coming years. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity in the field. And I think the other interesting thing is that with technology so rapidly developing, I mean, if you think about 20 years ago, what my smartphone looked like, it was not smart, and now where we're at today, and now with virtual reality and all the other technology, automation, intelligence, AI, I think that it's going to be critical for kids who are, young now to get involved in that field, because not just cyber, but I think every aspect of every career cyber touches, right? And so it's going to be important to just at least learn and be aware of those things. Um, but yeah.
That's great. No, definitely. How would you define success?
So I think, success to me is not measured in the number of years on somebody's resume. And that's something that I feel very strongly about. I think it's about how you apply yourself. I've seen some of the most brightest people that are way younger than me. And I just think it's all about how you apply yourself and how many skills you can learn and become proficient in. I think that there is a market there to stand out above, the rest. There's billions of people out there, but if you make yourself unique, then I think that that's the most important. I, have done hiring and things like that, and it's hard because you look at so many resumes, everything starts to look the same, and so those what I say call the stand out from the rest qualities are really important because you want to make yourself marketable to employers.
Absolutely. So, if a student were interested in engaging in the cyber field or think that's a path that they want to take, what would be your advice for a next step? So, if they're sitting in high school now saying, I think this is where I want to go, what would you recommend they do next?
I would say, I mean, certainly get involved if there's clubs or social media that, Online forums, as long as they're safe. Don't go talking to people that you don't know. But getting involved is the easiest way. Connecting with, they have a lot of conferences, and a lot of times when you enter college, they'll promote those conferences. So like, for example, the Women in Cybersecurity conference that's out there, but there's also other ones. So when you get older, you can go and attend those conferences and connect with people there. Shadow or intern at a company, even if it's unpaid, it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that. And make sure if you don't have to necessarily stay with just one company. If you're interning when you're in college, you could jump around and diversify your skills, so that way you kind of get a good mix of skills.
Excellent. So one last question for you. What is one piece of advice you'd leave our students with?
I think that I would say, don't be afraid to be unique. There are many times in my life where being unique may have not been received in the best way. And so I think, though, in the end, it really does help shape you. And, just like I said, standing out above the rest. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an overachiever, just a skill that you really are interested in, like honing in on that skill and, becoming maybe a subject matter expert or something like that in it. But just try to diversify yourself as much as you can.
That's great. Thank you, Valecia. This was excellent. So thank you all for joining us here today. Thank you again to our sponsors for the Spring 2022 edition, Martin Electric, Mosaic Associate Architects, and WB Games. We'll see you next time.